My name is Allison Carter, and at 28, I never expected to be both executive chef and part owner of the Sapphire, one of Boston's most acclaimed restaurants. The culinary world isn't always kind to young black women with ambition. I've worked twice as hard to earn half the respect my peers receive automatically. Last spring, one family's demand to speak to the real owner about my presence in my own restaurant became a turning point that transformed everything: my confidence, our business, and how I navigate spaces that weren't built for people like me. Before I tell you how it unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to prove you belonged somewhere. My love affair with food began in my grandmother's kitchen in Roxbury. Every Sunday after church, Grandma Elaine would tie an apron around my tiny waist and pull a stepping stool to the counter. "Cooking is storytelling," she'd say, guiding my small hands as we kneaded dough for her famous sweet potato biscuits. Every dish carries history, culture, and love. Those afternoons, watching her transform simple ingredients into meals that brought our family together, planted a seed that would grow into my life's passion. By 16, while other kids were hanging at the mall, I was staging, working for free, at any restaurant that would have me. My parents worried I was setting myself up for disappointment. "The culinary world is brutal for everyone," Dad would warn, "and even harder for people who look like us." He wasn't wrong, but that only made me more determined. Culinary school was my first real taste of the industry's inequities. In a class of 32 students, only 3 of us were black, and I was the only black woman. Instructors would often mistake my dishes for my white classmates, automatically assuming the more technical preparations couldn't be mine. One chef instructor consistently called me Alicia for an entire semester despite numerous corrections. Yet I graduated top of my class, landing an entry-level position at Bordeaux, a French restaurant downtown. The real education began there. I started as a commis, the lowest rank in the kitchen hierarchy, despite my qualifications. While my white male classmates were being hired as line cooks or even sous chefs at comparable establishments, I was assigned to prep work and garnishes. My station was tucked in the back corner, where guests touring the kitchen wouldn't see me. "You need to pay your dues," Executive Chef Pascal would say whenever I requested more responsibilities. Meanwhile, I watched him fast-track new male hires with less experience. Despite this, I absorbed everything, staying late to observe techniques, taking meticulous notes, and practicing difficult preparations during my limited free time. After 2 years of this treatment, I was finally promoted to line cook when half the kitchen staff left to follow the sous chef to a new restaurant. Suddenly indispensable, I thrived under pressure. It was during this chaotic period that I met James Wilson and Rebecca Martinez. They were regular diners at Bordeaux, who always requested kitchen view seating. Both were successful restaurateurs looking to open a new concept. One evening, when Chef Pascal was out sick, I was unexpectedly running the kitchen. James and Rebecca noticed the difference in the food immediately. "Who made this duck confit?" Rebecca asked the server, who pointed to me working frantically on the line. After their meal, they asked to speak with me. Exhausted and suspicious, I approached their table expecting complaints. "That was the best meal we've had here," James said. Rebecca nodded. "The balance of flavors, the precision in your cooking, it's exactly what we've been looking for." They explained their vision for a new restaurant, a place that would blend contemporary American cuisine with global influences, emphasizing sustainability and locally sourced ingredients. They'd been searching for a chef with both technical expertise and creative vision. "We'd like you to be our executive chef," James said. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "I'm only a line cook." "Title don't make chef," Rebecca replied. "Talent does." What they proposed next shocked me even more. Not only the executive chef position, but a 20% ownership stake in the restaurant. They would each hold 40%, making us true partners. "We bring the business experience," James explained, "but you'll bring the heart and soul." It seemed too good to be true. I was 25 with big dreams but limited options. After thorough research into their successful track record with 3 other restaurants, I took the leap. We spent 8 months developing the Sapphire. The name came from a pendant my grandmother always wore. For clarity of purpose, she'd say. The concept combined refined dining with accessibility, featuring an open kitchen where guests could watch their food being prepared. I designed a menu that honored my grandmother's philosophy. Every dish told a story. The location we chose was in South End, a historically black neighborhood now facing rapid gentrification. We made conscious hiring decisions, building a diverse staff that reflected Boston's cultural makeup. Dylan Smith, my friend from culinary school who'd faced his own barriers as a gay man in the industry, joined as our front of house manager. When we opened 2 years ago, the response exceeded our expectations. The Boston Globe gave us 4 stars, praising our boundary-crossing cuisine that manages to be both innovative and deeply comforting. Local food bloggers championed our commitment to highlighting diverse culinary traditions. Within 6 months, we were booked solid 3 weeks in advance. Despite our success, I still struggled with imposter syndrome. At industry events, people would often approach James or Rebecca first, assuming I was a staff member rather than an owner. Sometimes I'd play along, enjoying the shock on their faces when my partners redirected them to me. Other times, it stung. The incident that changed everything happened on a Saturday in April. We were fully booked with a waiting list, 30 names deep. The kitchen was humming with the controlled chaos I'd come to love. Chef Mike Reynolds, my sous chef and right hand, was expediting while I supervised every dish that left the kitchen. The energy was electric, everyone performing their roles with precision, born from countless services together. I had no idea that within hours, I would face a confrontation that would force me to decide exactly what kind of owner and chef I wanted to be. The Thompson family arrived at 7:30 p.m. without a reservation, exactly during our peak dinner service when every table was occupied and the kitchen was firing on all cylinders. From my position at the pass, the bridge between kitchen and dining room where I inspected each plate before service, I could see Dylan handling the front door with his usual grace. But something about his posture alerted me that something was off. Through the restaurant's ambient noise, a woman's voice cut sharply. "What do you mean there's no table available? Do you know who we are?" I couldn't see her clearly, just a blur of blonde hair and an expensive-looking cream-colored blazer. Dylan maintained his professional smile, the one I knew he reserved for difficult guests. "I apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am, but we're fully booked tonight. I'd be happy to add you to our waiting list, though it's currently about an hour and 15 minutes for a party of 3. The woman scoffed loudly enough that several nearby diners glanced up from their meals. "That's absolutely unacceptable. We drove all the way from Cambridge for this. Surely you can find something for us. That table by the window looks like they're finishing." "That table is reserved for guests arriving in 20 minutes, Dylan explained patiently. "However, we do have space at our chef's counter if you'd like a unique dining experience watching the kitchen in action." The woman who I would later learn was Karen Thompson looked at the chef's counter with visible disdain. "We didn't get dressed up to sit at a bar. I specifically want that corner table." She pointed to our best table, currently occupied by a couple celebrating their anniversary. A man beside her, her husband, Richard, placed a hand on her arm. "Karen, maybe we should try somewhere else." "No, Richard. I've heard so much about this place, and I'm not leaving without experiencing it." She turned back to Dylan. "Check again. There must be something you can do." Dylan's smile never faltered, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. "The chef's counter actually offers our premium experience. You'll be able to interact with our executive chef and see each dish being prepared specifically for you." The third member of their party, a younger woman who bore a striking resemblance to Karen, presumably their daughter, looked mortified. "Mom, it's fine. We can come back another time when they're not so busy." "Nonsense, Amber. They're in the service industry. Their job is to serve us." Karen's voice carried even further this time. After several more minutes of negotiation, Dylan finally seated them at a table that had been reserved for 9 p.m., which meant he would need to rearrange other reservations. As he led them through the dining room, I noticed Karen making comments about the decor, running her finger along the edge of a picture frame as if checking for dust. Within 10 minutes of being seated, they had already sent back the wine list, claiming it was too limited, despite our award-winning selection curated by Rebecca, who was a certified sommelier. Their server, Jasmine, approached the kitchen with a strained expression. "Table 12 is requesting substitutions on the tasting menu," she said, referring to the Thompsons. "The woman wants the halibut but without any of the spices, and she's asking if we can make the chocolate soufflé with Splenda instead of sugar." Our tasting menu was carefully designed to showcase seasonal ingredients and balanced flavor combinations. Substitutions, especially on busy nights, disrupted the kitchen's flow and often compromised the dish's integrity. "Tell them we're happy to accommodate allergies and dietary restrictions, but we don't modify the tasting menu otherwise," I responded. "They're welcome to order à la carte if they prefer more flexibility." Jasmine nodded, but the look on her face suggested she knew this wouldn't go over well. Sure enough, she returned minutes later, looking even more distressed. She's demanding to know why a supposedly high-end restaurant won't customize their experience. She also complained about the prices, saying they're outrageous for such small portions. Mike, who was plating a delicate arrangement of spring vegetables, rolled his eyes. "Classic. Probably wants Cheesecake Factory portions at Le Bernardin prices." I sighed, setting down my tweezers. "I'll handle this one. Keep an eye on the mangalitsa pork for table 8, it needs another 2 minutes." As I removed my apron and straightened my chef's jacket, I caught a glimpse of myself in the polished steel of the past. These moments, confronting diners who didn't believe a young black woman could be in charge of their fine dining experience, never got easier. But the sapphire was as much mine as it was James's or Rebecca's. This was my kitchen, my menu, my vision on each plate. I approached table 12 with professional courtesy. The plates of their first course, a spring pea velouté with truffle foam and crispy pancetta carried by Jasmine behind me. "Good evening. I'm Allison Carter, executive chef here at the Sapphire. I wanted to personally welcome you and explain our tasting menu philosophy." Karen Thompson looked up at me with mild surprise, perhaps not expecting the chef to be making rounds during peak service. Richard nodded politely, while their daughter, Amber, offered a genuine smile. "The food looks beautiful," Amber said as Jasmine placed the velouté before her. "Thank you," I replied. Each dish on our tasting menu is designed to tell a complete story through flavors, textures, and presentation. While we accommodate allergies and dietary restrictions, we generally don't modify the dishes otherwise, as it compromises the experience we're trying to create. Karen's expression tightened. "Well, I find that rather inflexible. We're paying customers, after all." "I understand," I said, maintaining my composure. "That's why we also offer our à la carte menu, which provides more options. The restaurant down the street was much more accommodating when we dined there last month," she replied, though she didn't make a move to leave. "I'm glad you found an experience that suited your preferences," I said diplomatically. "I hope you'll give our tasting menu a chance as is. If there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to let Jasmine know." As I turned to return to the kitchen, I caught a snippet of Karen's comment to Richard. "A bit young to be the chef, don't you think?" And not what I expected at all. The implication in her tone was clear. Not what she expected because of my race, my gender, or both. It was a familiar microaggression, one I'd encountered countless times throughout my career. Usually, I let these moments slide off my back, focusing instead on the food and the guests who appreciated it. But something about Karen Thompson told me this wouldn't be the last interaction I'd have with her that evening. As I re-entered the kitchen, the controlled chaos welcomed me back, temporarily pushing the encounter from my mind. I didn't realize that what had just transpired was merely the appetizer to what would become the most challenging and ultimately transformative night of my professional life. An hour into their meal, the Thompson family had created a ripple effect of tension throughout the restaurant. Jasmine had been to the kitchen 4 times with various complaints. The bread was too crusty, the room too cold, then too warm after we adjusted the temperature. Mike had taken to calling them table nightmare under his breath. I maintained my focus on the dozens of other guests having wonderful experiences, but my radar remained tuned to table 12. I was inspecting a plate of our signature scallop dish when Jasmine approached again, this time looking genuinely distressed. "Chef, I'm sorry, but Table 12 is insisting their steak is overcooked. Mrs. Thompson specifically requested medium rare, and she's claiming it's well done. This caught my attention. We took temperature precision seriously, using sous vide methods to ensure perfect consistency before the final sear. I glanced at the ticket. We confirmed medium rare, and Miguel is one of our most consistent cooks. Let me see it. Jasmine placed the plate on the pass. The sliced New York strip was a perfect, consistent pink throughout, textbook medium rare. I cut into a piece myself to verify the temperature. This is exactly medium rare. Did she cut into it? Yes, chef, she said, and I quote, "This is practically cremated." Her husband agreed with her. Mike peered over my shoulder at the steak and snorted. If that's cremated, I'm the Queen of England. I considered our options. We could prepare another steak, though it would delay their entire meal by at least 20 minutes. We could offer a different entree as a replacement. Or I could speak with them directly. I'll handle this personally, I decided. Please have another New York strip ready to fire, just in case. As I approached their table, I noticed several nearby diners watching with interest. Our open floor plan and transparent kitchen culture meant that guests often became invested in the rhythm and occasional drama of service. "Good evening again," I greeted them. "I understand there's an issue with your steak." Karen Thompson looked up at me with narrowed eyes. "Yes, I ordered medium rare, and this is well done." She pointed to the sliced meat on her plate, which was visibly pink. "I've inspected the steak myself, and it appears to be medium rare," I said evenly. "But I'd be happy to have the kitchen prepare a new one for you, if it's not to your liking." "It's not about liking," Karen retorted. "It's about getting what I ordered. And this is not medium rare." Richard nodded in agreement. "My wife knows her steaks. This is overcooked." I maintained my professional demeanor. "I apologize for the disappointment. Would you prefer a new steak, or would you like to select something else from the menu?" Karen pushed her plate away. "Neither. What I'd prefer is to speak to the owner about the quality of staff they're hiring these days. The service has been subpar all evening, and now this." The comment stung, but I'd heard worse. "I understand your frustration, Mrs. Thompson. I'm actually one of the owners, in addition to being the executive chef. I hold a 20% stake in the Sapphire, along with my two business partners." Karen's expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief, then to something resembling amusement. She exchanged a glance with her husband. "You?" she said, making no attempt to hide her skepticism. "You're an owner of this establishment?" "Yes, I am," I confirmed, straightening my posture slightly. Karen let out a short laugh. "I find that hard to believe. You look like you just graduated college. I'd like to speak to the real owner, please." My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "I assure you, I am one of the owners. I've been executive chef here since we opened 2 years ago. My partners and I developed the concept together." "Listen," Karen said, lowering her voice, but not enough to prevent nearby tables from hearing. "I understand if you're trying to avoid getting in trouble, but I need to speak with management about serious issues with our experience tonight." Amber, their daughter, who had been silent through most of this exchange, looked mortified. "Mom, please." "Not now, Amber." Karen cut her off without looking at her. Her attention remained fixed on me, her expression both dismissive and challenging. As I opened my mouth to respond, I distinctly heard Karen mutter to Richard, "I knew this place was overrated. They'll let anyone in a chef's coat claim they're in charge these days." The implication was clear, and from the uncomfortable expressions on nearby diners' faces, they had heard it too. A familiar heat crept up my neck, the sensation I'd felt countless times throughout my career when someone questioned my credentials, my abilities, or my right to occupy the space I'd earned. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled despite the anger building inside me, "I understand you're disappointed with your meal, and we want to make it right. But I need to clarify that I am indeed both the executive chef and one of the owners. If you'd prefer to speak with one of my business partners, I can arrange that, but they will tell you the same thing." "Yes, please do that," Karen said with a dismissive wave. I'd like to speak with the person actually in charge. The owner. Richard nodded in agreement, while Amber seemed to be trying to make herself as small as possible in her chair. Very well, I replied, my professional mask still in place, though increasingly difficult to maintain. I'll see if one of my partners is available. In the meantime, would you like us to prepare something else for you? We'll wait, Karen said coldly. As I walked away, I heard her say to Richard, can you believe that? Pretending to be an owner to avoid getting in trouble. So unprofessional. I returned to the kitchen, my hands slightly trembling not from fear, but from the effort of containing my reaction. Chef Mike noticed immediately. What happened? Do we need to fire another steak? No, I said, removing my phone from my pocket. I need to call James. Our friends at table 12 don't believe I'm an owner and want to speak with the real owner. Mike's expression darkened. Are you serious? I know exactly what it is. I cut him off, not wanting to have that conversation in front of the entire kitchen. But right now, I just need James to come downstairs from the office. As I stepped into the dry storage area to make the call, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a metal shelf. The woman staring back at me looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the long service hours. I was exhausted from constantly having to prove I belonged in spaces I had helped create. James answered on the second ring. Hey, Allison, everything okay down there? Not exactly, I replied, briefly explaining the situation. His response was immediate. I'll be right down. And Allison? You don't need me to validate your position. You know that, right? I know, I said, though part of me wasn't so sure anymore. But they're making a scene, and I'd rather not have this escalate further. After hanging up, I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and returned to the kitchen. I had a restaurant full of guests who deserved the best experience we could provide. I wouldn't let one prejudiced family derail our entire service. But as I returned to the pass, I could see Dylan by the Thompsons' table, apparently attempting to diffuse the situation that was growing louder by the minute. The confrontation I'd been trying to contain was about to spill over into the carefully crafted atmosphere of the Sapphire. By the time I made it back to the dining room, Karen Thompson was standing, her voice carrying throughout the restaurant. Dylan stood beside their table, his customer service smile strained to its breaking point. I don't understand why this is so difficult, Karen was saying. I simply want to speak to whoever is in charge, the actual owner, not someone pretending to have authority. Ma'am, Dylan replied with remarkable patience. As Chef Allison explained, she is one of our 3 owners and the executive chef. She is absolutely authorized to address any concerns you have. I approached them, aware that nearly every guest in the restaurant was now watching this unfold. The ambient music and dinner conversations had dimmed as people tuned in to the disruption. Mrs. Thompson, I said, my business partner is on his way down from the office. In the meantime, I'd appreciate if you could lower your voice, as it's disturbing our other guests. Karen turned to me with an expression of triumph. Ah, so there is a real owner available. I knew you were just saying that to avoid trouble. The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. As I've stated multiple times, I am one of 3 owners. James Wilson and Rebecca Martinez are my business partners. We all hold ownership stakes in the Sapphire. Karen scoffed. Right, and I suppose you all just let you run around claiming to be in charge? She turned to the nearby tables. Can you believe this? Instead of simply admitting their mistake with my meal, they've concocted this whole story. A few diners looked uncomfortable, while others were watching with open disapproval, though whether directed at Karen or me remained unclear. Richard Thompson, who had remained seated, now stood beside his wife. I think we deserve some transparency here. If you're truly an owner, surely you have some credentials or documentation you could show us? My jaw clenched. I don't make a habit of carrying my business license and partnership agreement during dinner service, Mr. Thompson. Convenient, Karen muttered. Amber, still seated, looked close to tears. Mom, Dad, please, this is embarrassing. Can we just go somewhere else? No, Amber, Karen snapped. This is about principle. We're paying customers, and we deserve respect and honesty. The irony of her demanding respect while showing none wasn't lost on me or the observing diners. I caught sight of a regular customer, Mark Johnson, discreetly holding his phone at an angle that suggested he was recording the interaction. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, lowering my voice to force her to quiet down, if she wanted to hear me. "I've offered to replace your steak or provide an alternative dish. I've also confirmed that I'm one of the owners of this establishment. My partner will be here momentarily to corroborate this, though it's unfortunate that my word isn't sufficient for you. People like you always want to claim authority you don't have," Karen replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've been in business for 30 years, and I know owners don't typically work in the kitchen, especially not in a place like this." The racial undertone in "people like you" and her skepticism about my presence in a place like this was impossible to miss. Several nearby diners audibly gasped. "What exactly do you mean by people like me, Mrs. Thompson?" I asked, forcing her to articulate her prejudice. Karen's expression faltered for a split second before she doubled down. "Young people who haven't paid their dues, who think they can just walk in and be in charge without working their way up properly." It was a weak backpedal, but she seemed to realize she'd crossed a line with her previous comment. Richard placed a hand on her arm, perhaps sensing the same. "Karen, maybe we should—" "No, Richard," she shook off his hand. "I want to know how someone so young could possibly afford to own a share in a restaurant in this neighborhood. It doesn't add up." Dylan, who had been observing with increasing tension, stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, I must ask you to lower your voice. You're disrupting service for everyone." "I'll do no such thing," Karen retorted, her volume increasing instead. "Not until someone in actual authority addresses our concerns. I'll have you know I write restaurant reviews for my community newsletter, and I have over 5,000 followers on Instagram. One post from me about this treatment, and what exactly?" The new voice came from behind me. James had arrived, immaculately dressed in one of his tailored suits, projecting the exact image of authority and ownership that the Thompsons apparently expected. The relief I felt at his arrival was immediately followed by a wave of shame. Why should I need James to validate my position in my own restaurant? Karen's demeanor changed instantly. Her posture straightened, and her expression shifted from indignation to something approaching respect. Finally, someone who looks like they're in charge. "Are you the owner?" James approached slowly, his expression neutral, but his eyes hard. "I'm James Wilson, one of the owners of the Sapphire." "Thank goodness," Karen said with a performative sigh of relief. "We've been trying to address some serious concerns about our meal and the service, but we've been getting the runaround from staff claiming to be management." James raised an eyebrow. "Staff claiming to be management?" "Yes," Karen nodded toward me. "This woman has been pretending to be an owner, if you can believe it. I asked to speak to whoever's in charge, and she claimed it was her." The restaurant had fallen completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had paused to watch through the open pass. I felt a strange detachment, as though I were watching this scene happen to someone else. Years of similar microaggressions and outright racism in the culinary world flashed through my mind: the instructors who ignored my raised hand, the diners who requested the chef after I'd cooked their meal, the investors who would only speak to male sous chefs during our pop-up events before the Sapphire. James looked at Karen for a long moment, then at me, then back to Karen. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Allison Carter is absolutely an owner of the Sapphire. In fact, she's our executive chef and the primary reason for our success. Her culinary vision is what defines this restaurant." Karen's confident expression faltered. "But she's so young. And she works in the kitchen." "Yes," James replied coldly. "She is young and exceptionally talented. As for working in the kitchen, that's what executive chefs do. Allison is not just an employee. She's my business partner and the heart and soul of the Sapphire." Karen looked between James and me, clearly searching for a way to maintain her position. "Well, she certainly didn't present herself very professionally when we had concerns about our meal. According to my staff and several witnesses," James gestured around the room, "Chef Carter has been nothing but professional, despite your inappropriate behavior. Now, I believe she offered to replace your steak or provide an alternative dish. Would you like to accept either of those options? Or would you prefer to settle your bill for what you've consumed thus far and dine elsewhere? The direct challenge left Karen momentarily speechless. Richard shifted uncomfortably beside her, while Amber looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. When Karen found her voice again, her tone had shifted from righteous indignation to defensive anger. "This is ridiculous. We're paying customers. You can't speak to us this way." "Actually, I can," James replied evenly. "Particularly when you've insulted my business partner in her own restaurant. The Sapphire has a strict policy against allowing guests to abuse our staff or ownership. So I'll ask again. Would you like a replacement meal, or would you prefer to leave?" Karen's face flushed red. "You're both liars. I want to see proof, actual documentation that she owns any part of this place." At this point, other guests began to murmur disapprovingly. One older woman at a nearby table said loudly enough to be heard, "For heaven's sake, just leave them alone and let us enjoy our dinners." I felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for James's unwavering support, humiliation at needing to be defended in my own restaurant, and a deep, simmering anger that people like the Thompsons still felt entitled to question my legitimacy because of my race and gender. Before James could respond to Karen's demand for documentation, a movement near the host stand caught my attention. Rebecca had arrived, likely called by Dylan or having heard the commotion from her office. Her timing couldn't have been better or worse, depending on how you looked at it. The confrontation was reaching its boiling point, and I could feel the fragile control I'd maintained over my emotions beginning to slip. Rebecca Martinez, elegant in her signature black pantsuit, walked purposefully toward our group. I'd never been more grateful to see my other business partner, yet simultaneously mortified that both of them were now being pulled into this spectacle. "What's happening here?" Rebecca asked, her tone calm but authoritative. After 15 years managing high-end restaurants before opening her own, Rebecca had mastered the art of diffusing tense situations with guests. Karen, seemingly relieved to see another authority figure, turned to Rebecca. "Finally, someone else in management. These two are claiming she's an owner." She gestured dismissively toward me, "but they've refused to provide any proof." Rebecca's expression didn't change, but I knew her well enough to recognize the dangerous glint in her eyes. "I see. And you are?" "Karen Thompson. My husband Richard and our daughter Amber. We're trying to enjoy a nice family dinner, but the service has been atrocious, and when we tried to address it with the chef, she claimed to be an owner. When we quite reasonably asked for verification, this gentleman," she nodded toward James, "became confrontational." Rebecca nodded slowly, taking in the situation. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Rebecca Martinez. I own 40% of the Sapphire, equal to James Wilson's share. Allison Carter owns the remaining 20%. She is our executive chef and the creative force behind every dish on our menu. Without her, this restaurant wouldn't exist." Karen's expression flickered between disbelief and embarrassment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, how was I supposed to know that? She looks like she could be kitchen help." The blatant racism in her statement hung in the air. Several diners gasped audibly. Chef Mike, who had emerged from the kitchen, along with several other staff members to watch the confrontation, took a step forward before Dylan placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Kitchen help," I repeated, my voice quiet but clear in the now silent restaurant. "I've been kitchen help since I was 16 years old, Mrs. Thompson. I've scrubbed pots, prepped vegetables, and worked every station on the line. I've burned my arms, cut my fingers, and worked 80-hour weeks to learn my craft. I earned my position as executive chef. I earned my stake in this restaurant. And I don't need to prove that to you or anyone else." My voice had risen despite my efforts to remain composed. Years of swallowing similar comments, of smiling through microaggressions, of working twice as hard to be considered half as capable, it all surged to the surface. Karen, rather than backing down, seemed emboldened by having finally provoked a reaction. "See? This is exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior I'm talking about. If she really is an owner, which I still doubt, she clearly doesn't have the temperament for it. In my day, Kitchen staff knew their place and didn't pretend to be something they're not. That's enough, James said sharply. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We haven't finished our meal, Richard interjected, finding his voice again. Your meal is on the house, Rebecca replied, but your presence is no longer welcome here. Karen's face flushed with anger. You can't be serious. Do you know who we are in this community? I sit on the board of 3 charitable organizations. I can destroy your reputation with one social media post. Do your worst, James replied, but do it from outside our restaurant. Karen reached for her water glass, and for a moment I thought she might throw it. Instead, she deliberately knocked it over, sending water cascading across the table and onto the floor. Oops, she said with mock innocence. Clumsy me. I hope that doesn't ruin your precious floors. She grabbed her designer handbag. You'll be hearing from our attorney. My cashmere is ruined, and this has been a thoroughly traumatic experience. Come on, Richard. Amber, we're leaving. Richard immediately stood to follow his wife. But Amber remained seated, her face a mask of mortification. Amber, now, Karen demanded. Mom, this is wrong, Amber said quietly. You should apologize. Karen grabbed her daughter's arm. Don't be ridiculous. These people have been completely unprofessional. Now come on. Dylan had already signaled to our security guard, Marcus, who typically monitored the door during weekend service. He approached our group with a respectful nod to me. Chef, is there a problem? These guests were just leaving, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil I felt inside. We can find our own way out, Karen snapped, pulling Amber to her feet. And don't think this is over. By the time I'm done posting about this experience, you'll wish you'd never pretended to be the owner. As the Thompson family made their way toward the exit, Karen still fuming and Richard following obediently, Amber hung back for a moment. When her parents were out of earshot, she turned to me. I'm so sorry, she whispered, genuine remorse in her eyes. This was horrible, and you didn't deserve any of it. Before I could respond, she hurried after her parents. The restaurant remained eerily quiet for several seconds after the door closed behind them. Then, to my complete surprise, a slow clapping started from a table near the window. Mark Johnson, the regular customer who had been recording the incident, stood up. Others joined in, and suddenly the entire dining room erupted in applause. The unexpected support broke something loose inside me. The careful composure I'd maintained throughout my career, the professional mask I wore, even when facing the most blatant discrimination it cracked. I felt tears threatening and quickly turned away from the dining room, heading toward the kitchen's back exit. I need a minute, I muttered to James and Rebecca as I passed them. In the alley behind the restaurant, the cool April air hit my face. I leaned against the brick wall, taking deep breaths to regain my composure. The service door opened, and I expected to see James or Rebecca, but it was Chef Mike who stepped out, concern etched on his face. You okay, Chef? I wiped my eyes quickly. I'm fine. Just needed some air. Mike leaned against the wall beside me. That woman was the worst kind of entitled racist I've seen in a long time, and I grew up in rural Georgia, so that's saying something. Despite everything, I laughed. Yeah, she was something special. You handled it like a boss, though, Mike said. Which makes sense, since you literally are the boss. I sighed, the weight of the confrontation settling on my shoulders. It never gets easier, you know? No matter how much I achieve, there's always someone questioning whether I deserve to be here, whether I earned it, or just checked some diversity boxes. Those people are idiots, Mike said bluntly. Anyone who's ever tasted your food or worked in your kitchen knows exactly why you're here. The service door opened again, and this time James and Rebecca joined us in the alley. The dining room is asking for you, Rebecca said gently. They want to give you a proper standing ovation. I shook my head. I can't go back out there right now. I'm too human, James suggested. Allison, what happened in there wasn't your fault. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. I know that intellectually, I replied. But emotionally, I feel humiliated. In my own restaurant, I had to have you two validate my position. After everything I've accomplished, I'm still just a black woman who doesn't look like she belongs. Rebecca stepped closer, her expression serious. Listen to me. What happened tonight happens because of their prejudice, not because of any failing on your part. You belong here more than anyone. This is your vision, your menu, your restaurant, and frankly, James added, I'm sick of people like the Thompsons thinking they can treat anyone that way, especially you. We're going to need to talk about how we handle this when they inevitably start posting online. The mention of potential online backlash brought me back to the reality of the situation. One negative review could be dismissed. But if Karen followed through on her threats to mobilize her social connections against us, the damage could be significant. The Sapphire was successful but still establishing itself in Boston's competitive dining scene. We should get back inside, I said, straightening up and squaring my shoulders. We still have a full restaurant to feed. As we walked back toward the door, Rebecca placed a hand on my arm. For what it's worth, I've never been prouder to be your business partner than I was tonight. The way you stood up for yourself in there, that's the Allison Carter I knew would make this place special. Her words warmed something in me that had gone cold during the confrontation. Maybe I had needed external validation more than I wanted to admit, not of my position or credentials, but of my right to defend them. As we re-entered the kitchen, the staff paused in their work, watching me with a mixture of concern, respect, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Then Chef Mike cleared his throat. Back to work, everyone. We've still got 30 covers to go, and Chef Carter doesn't like cold plates. The familiar rhythm of the kitchen resumed, but something had shifted. As I washed my hands and retied my apron, I caught Dylan watching me from the pass. What is it? I asked. That customer who was recording? Dylan said. Mark Johnson? He's a civil rights attorney. He left his card and said to call him if you want to discuss options. I nodded, tucking this information away to consider later. Right now, I had a restaurant to run and guests to feed. Whatever fallout came from tonight's confrontation would have to wait until after service. But as I returned to the pass and began inspecting the plates waiting to go out, I realized that something fundamental had changed. The heaviness in my chest wasn't just anger or humiliation anymore. There was a strange new lightness there, too. For perhaps the first time in my career, I had stood my ground not just as a chef, but as an owner, as a Black woman, as Allison Carter in her entirety. That was a turning point I hadn't seen coming, but now that it had arrived, I knew nothing would be quite the same again. The remainder of that evening's service passed in a blur. After the Thompson family's dramatic exit, the energy in the restaurant transformed. Guests who had witnessed the confrontation stopped me as I made rounds through the dining room, expressing their support and indignation on my behalf. Several left larger tips than usual, with notes of encouragement for our staff. One older Black couple who had been dining with us since opening night asked to speak with me personally. We've been watching you grow since you started, the woman said, clasping my hand between hers. What you dealt with tonight is something too many of us have faced. The way you handled yourself made us proud. Her words touched me deeply. I'd always focused on letting my food speak for itself, believing that excellence was the best response to prejudice. But tonight had forced me to speak up directly, to claim my space not just through my work but through my words. After the last guest departed and the kitchen was clean, James called an impromptu staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the dining room, looking tired but strangely energized. The adrenaline from the evening's drama still coursed through all of us. First, I want to thank everyone for maintaining professionalism during a difficult situation, James began. Particularly Jasmine, Dylan, and of course, Allison. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the staff. Jasmine, who had been subjected to Karen's rudeness throughout the meal, gave a small smile of appreciation. Second, James continued, we need to prepare for possible fallout. Based on Mrs. Thompson's threats, we may face some negative online reviews or social media attacks in the coming days. Let them come, Chef Mike said firmly. Anyone who was here tonight knows what really happened. Rebecca stepped forward. We've already received 6 emails from guests who witnessed the incident, offering statements of support if needed. And Mark Johnson, who's apparently a civil rights attorney, has offered legal assistance if Mrs. Thompson follows through on her threats. I don't want to sue anyone, I interjected. That would just prolong this whole thing. Agreed, Rebecca nodded. but having his support as a precaution is valuable. Dylan raised his hand. I've already seen 2 positive mentions on social media from guests tonight, specifically calling out how Chef Allison handled the situation with grace, despite blatant racism. The narrative is already forming in our favor. The practical discussion of next steps helped ground me. This wasn't just about my personal feelings of humiliation or anger. It was about protecting the business we'd all worked so hard to build. The most important thing, I said, finding my voice, is that we don't let this incident change who we are or what the Sapphire stands for. We've created a space that celebrates diversity in both our staff and our cuisine. That's not changing because of one prejudiced family. Well said, James agreed. Now, everyone gets some rest. Tomorrow's another day. As the staff dispersed, Mark Johnson approached me. He'd stayed behind after paying his bill, apparently sensing we might need support. Miss Carter, he extended his hand. I want to apologize for recording without your explicit permission, but I thought you might need evidence of what transpired. Thank you, I replied sincerely. And please, call me Allison. Allison, then. He smiled. I've been coming to the Sapphire since you opened. Your food is extraordinary, and the environment you've created here is special. What happened tonight was textbook discriminatory harassment. It was, I acknowledged, but it's also something I've dealt with in various forms throughout my career. It's unfortunately not unusual. That doesn't make it acceptable, Mark replied firmly. If you'd like, I can send you the recording. You might want it if Mrs. Thompson decides to post a distorted version of events online. I'd appreciate that, I said, taking his card. Though I'm hoping this just blows over. Mark's expression suggested he thought that unlikely, but he simply nodded. Either way, I'm here if you need assistance, and I'll continue to be a loyal customer regardless. After he left, James, Rebecca, and I remained, the 3 of us alone in the restaurant we'd built together. Drink? James suggested, moving toward the bar. God, yes, Rebecca and I answered in unison. As James poured 3 glasses of bourbon, the good stuff we kept for special occasions, Rebecca studied me carefully. How are you really doing? She asked quietly. I considered the question seriously before answering. Honestly, I'm exhausted, and angry, and hurt. But also, I don't know. Maybe stronger? Stronger how? James asked, sliding our glasses across the bar. For years, I've tried to avoid confrontation, to let my work speak for itself, I explained, taking a sip of bourbon and letting the warmth spread through my chest. Tonight, when that wasn't an option, when I had to directly stand up for myself and my position here, it was terrifying, but also liberating. Rebecca nodded in understanding. You've always belonged here, Allison, but maybe tonight you finally felt it without reservation. The thing is, I continued, the bourbon loosening my usual reserve, I've spent so much of my career trying not to be the angry black woman that sometimes I've swallowed legitimate anger. Tonight, I finally let some of it out, and the restaurant didn't collapse. James pointed out with a small smile. In fact, our guests respected you more for it. The look on Karen's face when both of you backed me up. I couldn't help the small, satisfied smile that formed. That was almost worth the whole ordeal. The 3 musketeers, Rebecca raised her glass. All for one, and one for all. We clinked glasses, the simple gesture reaffirming the partnership that had seemed so unlikely 3 years ago. A middle-aged white man with business connections, a Latina woman with restaurant management expertise, and a young black chef with culinary vision. You know, James said thoughtfully, this could actually be an opportunity. The way you handled tonight resonated with people. It was authentic and powerful. What are you suggesting? I asked, suddenly wary of where this might be going. Nothing exploitative, he clarified quickly. Just that perhaps it's time for you to step more fully into your role as the face of the Sapphire, not just in the kitchen, but publicly. Your story, your journey to ownership is compelling, especially in an industry that still lacks diversity at the top. James is right, Rebecca added. We've always featured your food, but we've been relatively quiet about your ownership stake. Maybe that's been a mistake. I'd always been more comfortable behind the scenes, letting my cooking take center stage, rather than my identity. But tonight had shown me that visibility mattered not just for me, but for every young black chef who might see themselves in my journey. I'll think about it, I promised. As I walked to my car later that night, emotionally drained but somehow lighter, my phone pinged with a notification. Dylan had sent the staff a message. Check Instagram. The Sapphire Stands is trending locally. Curious, I opened the app to find dozens of posts from guests who had witnessed the confrontation, expressing support for the restaurant and specifically for me. Many included variations of "Speak to the owner." She was the owner, and black-owned businesses deserve respect. One post from Mark Johnson had already garnered thousands of likes. Something shifted inside me as I scrolled through the outpouring of support. The humiliation I'd felt earlier began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of pride and purpose. What had happened tonight wasn't just about one entitled family's racism, it was about claiming space in an industry that hadn't always welcomed people who looked like me. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was my grandmother. "I just got off the phone with your mama," she said without preamble. "She said you had some trouble at the restaurant tonight." News traveled fast in my family. "It's been handled, Grandma. Nothing to worry about." She hummed skeptically. "You know what my mama used to tell me? When they question your place at the table, don't just sit there, build your own table and invite others to join you." Her words struck a chord. The Sapphire was my table, the one I'd helped build from nothing. And tonight, instead of shrinking from confrontation, I defended my right to sit at its head. "I love you, Grandma," I said, emotion suddenly thick in my throat. "Love you too, baby. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day." As I drove home through Boston's quiet streets, I realized that something fundamental had changed. The confrontation that had been meant to diminish me had instead become a turning point not just for me personally, but potentially for the Sapphire itself. I thought about Karen Thompson, who had attempted to put me in my place tonight. Her biggest mistake wasn't confronting me or demanding to speak to the real owner. Her biggest mistake was assuming I didn't belong in the position I'd earned, and doing so in a restaurant full of people who knew better. For the first time since opening the Sapphire, I felt not just like a chef who happened to be an owner, but like an owner who happened to be a chef. The distinction was subtle but profound. And I had Karen Thompson, ironically, to thank for it. The next morning, I awoke to my phone buzzing incessantly. Texts, calls, and social media notifications poured in faster than I could process them. Bleary-eyed, I scrolled through the messages, slowly comprehending what was happening. Mark Johnson's video of the confrontation had gone viral overnight. The clip showed Karen Thompson demanding to speak to the real owner and her visible disbelief when James confirmed my position. The recording ended with the applause that had erupted after the Thompson family's exit. The hashtag The Sapphire Stands had spread beyond Boston, with thousands of shares and supportive comments. "Chef, have you seen this?" Mike texted, linking to a Boston Globe article titled "Black Chef Owner Stands Firm Against Discrimination at Award-Winning Restaurant." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. The article detailed the incident, including statements from several guests who had witnessed it. The reporter had done their homework, mentioning my culinary background and the unique partnership structure of the Sapphire. The piece ended with a powerful quote from Mark Johnson. "Chef Allison Carter exemplifies excellence in both her cooking and her character. The Sapphire doesn't just serve extraordinary food, it stands for dignity and respect in an industry that hasn't always provided either to people of color." Before I could fully process this, Rebecca called. "Have you seen the reservation system?" she asked without preamble. "No. Why?" "We're completely booked for the next 2 months. Every slot, including Mondays when we're usually closed." The website nearly crashed from the traffic. I struggled to find words. Wow. "It gets better," Rebecca continued. 3 local news stations have requested interviews with you, and Cuisine Today wants to do a feature on minority-owned restaurants in Boston, with the Sapphire as the centerpiece." "This is a lot," I admitted, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "I know," Rebecca's voice softened. "But Allison, this is an opportunity, not just for business, but to change the conversation about ownership and representation in the restaurant industry. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to sort through my conflicting emotions. While the support was heartwarming, I'd never sought to be the face of a movement or a symbol of resistance. I'd simply wanted to cook extraordinary food and build a successful business. A text from James popped up. "Check your email." Karen Thompson's official response. With a sense of dread, I opened my email to find a message from Karen that had been sent to the Sapphire's general inbox, copied to several local media outlets. "To whom it may concern, my family and I experienced deeply distressing treatment at your establishment last night. After politely requesting to speak with management regarding subpar service and overcooked food, we were met with hostility and ultimately forced to leave. The claim that my concerns were racially motivated is both false and defamatory. As a longtime supporter of diversity initiatives through my charitable work, I find these accusations particularly hurtful. I have consulted with my attorney regarding possible legal action for defamation and emotional distress. However, I am willing to resolve this matter amicably if the Sapphire issues a public apology within 24 hours. Regards, Karen Thompson, Board Member, Cambridge Community Foundation." I forwarded the email to Mark Johnson, who responded within minutes. "Classic Darvo deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Don't worry, the video speaks for itself. No apology necessary." By the time I arrived at the Sapphire for our emergency management meeting, a small crowd had gathered outside the restaurant. For a moment, I feared Karen had organized some kind of protest. Instead, I was greeted with applause as I stepped out of my car. Supporters had come to express solidarity, many holding signs with messages like "Black-owned," "Proudly supported," and "The Sapphire stands." "We stand with the Sapphire." Inside, the staff was buzzing with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Dylan had created a spreadsheet to track all media mentions and online reviews, which he projected onto the wall of our private dining room. "The good news," he explained, "is that the positive coverage outweighs the negative by about 20 to 1. Karen did post a 1-star review on every platform she could find, and a few of her friends followed suit. But they've been buried under hundreds of 5-star reviews from supporters, many of whom haven't even dined here yet." "That's not exactly ethical," I frowned. "No," Rebecca agreed, "but it's happening organically. People feel strongly about this." James arrived with Mark Johnson, who had offered to consult with us about how to handle the situation moving forward. "First," Mark advised, "no direct response to Karen's email. Any communication gives her something to twist and use against you." "What about her legal threats?" I asked. "Empty," Mark assured me. "The video clearly shows what happened. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Besides, she's the one who made racially charged statements in a public space. So we just do nothing?" The passive approach didn't sit right with me. "Not nothing," Mark clarified. "You continue being exactly who you are, an exceptional chef and business owner who didn't back down when challenged. The best response is success." As we discussed next steps, Chef Mike interrupted with breaking news. Karen Thompson had been asked to resign from 2 of her board positions after the video went viral. Her community newsletter had issued a statement distancing themselves from her views. Even more surprisingly, we'd received an email from Amber Thompson. "I wanted to apologize again for my parents' behavior," her message read. "There is no excuse for how they treated you. I've been trying to address their prejudices for years. But this incident has finally forced some difficult family conversations. I'm deeply sorry for the pain they caused, and I admire the dignity with which you handled the situation." The email ended with a request to make a reservation for one in the coming weeks. "If you'll still have me." "Of course we'll have her," I said immediately. "She shouldn't be punished for her parents' behavior." Over the next several hours, we developed a plan. I would do a limited number of interviews, focusing on the positive aspects of the Sapphire's diverse ownership and culinary philosophy, rather than dwelling on the negative incident. We would expand our hours temporarily to accommodate the surge in reservations, and most importantly, we would use this unexpected spotlight to launch a mentorship program I'd been considering for young chefs from underrepresented backgrounds. By the time we opened for dinner service, a line had formed outside. Many guests mentioned they'd come specifically to show support. Throughout the evening, people approached me to share their own stories of being questioned, dismissed, or underestimated because of their identity. Each conversation reinforced what I was beginning to understand, that my personal experience had resonated with so many others who had faced similar challenges. One conversation particularly stood out. A young black woman, perhaps 19 or 20, waited until the end of service to approach me. "Chef Carter," she said shyly, "I'm a first-year culinary student. I've been following your career since you opened the Sapphire. Seeing you stand up for yourself last night," she paused, eyes shining. "It made me believe I could make it in this industry too." Her words hit me harder than any of the media attention or business success. This was the real impact, inspiring the next generation to claim their space in a world that might question their right to be there. "What's your name?" I asked her. "Jasmine," she replied. "Jasmine Williams." "Well, Jasmine Williams," I said, making a split-second decision. "How would you feel about an internship here next summer? We could use someone with your passion." Her expression of shocked joy was worth everything I'd been through. As she left clutching my business card like a precious artifact, I realized that the painful confrontation with Karen Thompson had opened doors not just for me, but potentially for many others. 3 days after the incident, the Sapphire hosted a special dinner service that we called Community Table. We pushed the restaurant's tables together to create one long communal dining experience, serving family-style courses that reflected Boston's diverse cultural heritage. The event sold out within hours of being announced. As I moved through the packed restaurant that evening, stopping to explain each dish and its significance, I felt a new confidence in my role. No longer was I hiding in the kitchen, letting James and Rebecca handle the public-facing aspects of ownership. I was fully present, fully visible, fully claiming my place. Near the end of the night, Rebecca clinked her glass for attention. "We want to thank everyone for your overwhelming support this week," she began. "What started as an unfortunate incident has transformed into a beautiful demonstration of community." James continued, "The Sapphire has always been about bringing people together through extraordinary food. But it's also about creating space for voices that deserve to be heard." He gestured for me to join them. As I stepped forward, the room erupted in applause. For once, I didn't feel the urge to deflect the attention or retreat to the comfort of my kitchen. 3 years ago, I said when the applause subsided, I was a line cook with big dreams and limited opportunities. James and Rebecca took a chance on me, not just as a chef, but as a partner with a vision. What happened this week has reminded me of something important. When someone questions your place at the table, the answer isn't to shrink away. It's to pull up your chair, sit tall, and make room for others to join you. The room filled with cheers and raised glasses. In that moment, surrounded by support and solidarity, I finally understood that what Karen Thompson had intended as an attack had instead become a catalyst for transformation for me, for the Sapphire, and potentially for an industry long overdue for change. The confrontation that had begun with "I want to speak to the owner" had indeed been Karen Thompson's biggest mistake. But it had become my most significant opportunity. 3 months after what the staff now jokingly referred to as the Karen incident, the Sapphire had transformed in ways none of us could have predicted. The surge in reservations hadn't been a temporary phenomenon. Our wait list remained weeks long, despite extending our hours and adding Sunday brunch service. More importantly, the character and mission of the restaurant had evolved, becoming more intentional and purposeful. On a warm July morning, I stood before a group of 20 culinary students gathered in our dining room before opening hours. Most were people of color, many from neighborhoods like Roxbury and Dorchester where I'd grown up. This was the inaugural class of the Sapphire Mentorship Program, an initiative born directly from the aftermath of the confrontation with the Thompson family. "Welcome to the Sapphire," I began, surveying the eager young faces. "Each of you is here because you've demonstrated exceptional talent and determination. Over the next 6 weeks, you'll work alongside our team, learning not just culinary techniques, but the business of running a successful restaurant. I paused, remembering how desperately I would have wanted this opportunity at their age. You'll also learn something they don't teach in culinary school: how to navigate an industry that might sometimes question your belonging. I won't sugarcoat it, the path won't always be easy. But I'm living proof that with skill, perseverance, and the right support, you can claim your place at any table, or better yet, build your own. As the students moved into the kitchen to begin their first lesson with Chef Mike, James approached me with an envelope. "This just arrived," he said. "Thought you might want to open it privately." The return address showed the Thompson name with a Cambridge zip code. I braced myself for another legal threat or demand for apology, but what I found inside surprised me. The letter, handwritten on expensive stationery, was from Richard Thompson. "Dear Chef Carter, I am writing to apologize for my family's behavior during our visit to the Sapphire in April. While my wife has her own perspective on the events of that evening, I cannot in good conscience continue to support the way we conducted ourselves. The truth is that I recognized your name when we arrived. I had read about you in Boston Magazine's 30 Under 30 feature last year and was impressed by your journey. Yet when the moment came to speak up during my wife's confrontation with you, I remained silent, becoming complicit in her disrespect. There is no excuse for this failure, though perhaps some context might help you understand. For 30 years, I have taken the path of least resistance in my marriage, prioritizing peace over principle. That night at your restaurant was a painful mirror reflecting my own moral compromises. Since then, Karen and I have begun marriage counseling. Amber has been instrumental in pushing us toward accountability. She speaks highly of her recent experiences dining at the Sapphire without us, and of your grace in welcoming her despite our behavior. This letter cannot undo the hurt we caused, but I hope it might contribute in some small way to healing. I have made a donation in your name to the culinary program at Roxbury Community College, which I understand is where you first studied cooking. With sincere regret and admiration, Richard Thompson." I refolded the letter, unsure how to feel. The apology seemed genuine, if long overdue, and yet it was striking that it came from Richard rather than Karen, who had been the primary instigator. "Everything okay?" James asked, noting my expression. I handed him the letter. Better than expected, actually. As James read it, Rebecca joined us, carrying a stack of press clippings. Since the incident, the Sapphire had been featured in numerous publications, from local Boston papers to national magazines like Food and Wine and Bon Appetit. The narrative had evolved from the initial focus on the confrontation to deeper discussions about diversity in restaurant ownership and the barriers faced by chefs of color. "The Beard Foundation called," Rebecca announced. "They want you to speak on their panel about equity in the culinary world at their leadership summit in September." Just a year ago, I would have declined such an invitation, preferring to let my food speak for itself. Now, I understood that my voice literally speaking out about my experiences was equally important. "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. Rebecca smiled knowingly. "I thought you might say that. Also, the investors for the second location are ready to meet next week." The expansion plans had been in discussion before the Thompson incident, but had accelerated in its wake. The Sapphire's sister restaurant would open in Roxbury, my home neighborhood, with an even stronger emphasis on community engagement and accessibility. I had insisted that we price the menu to ensure local residents could afford to dine there, not just the gentrifiers moving into the area. As I prepared for pre-service lineup with the staff, my phone pinged with a notification. It was a direct message on Instagram from Amber Thompson. "Just wanted to let you know that Mom finally watched the full video from that night," she cried. "She won't admit it publicly yet, but it's a start. Thank you for being the catalyst for change in our family. Reservation for 2 next Friday, bringing my boyfriend this time." I smiled, saving the message to show James and Rebecca later. The narrative I had feared would destroy our business had instead strengthened it beyond measure. More importantly, it had forced growth and reflection not just for me, but apparently for the Thompsons as well. At lineup, I looked around at our staff, now expanded to accommodate our increased business. The team was even more diverse than when we'd opened, with several new hires coming from neighborhoods and backgrounds underrepresented in fine dining. Dylan had been promoted to general manager, and Chef Mike to chef de cuisine, allowing me to balance kitchen duties with my new public-facing responsibilities. Before we open, I said to the assembled staff, I want to take a moment to acknowledge how far we've come. 3 months ago, someone questioned whether I belonged in this space, whether I could truly be an owner of the Sapphire. Today, there's no question. Murmurs of agreement and a few cheers rippled through the group. But this journey hasn't just been about me claiming my place, I continued. It's about creating space for all of you to thrive, to advance, to lead. The Sapphire stands for excellence in food, yes, but also for dignity, respect, and opportunity. As service began and the dining room filled with guests, I moved confidently between the kitchen and front of house, no longer feeling the need to hide behind the stoves. When diners recognized me and asked for photos or signatures on their menus, I obliged with genuine pleasure rather than awkward discomfort. Later that evening, during a rare lull, I found myself standing at the pass beside James and Rebecca, surveying the bustling restaurant that was our shared creation. Remember when we first talked about opening this place? James reminisced. We had such modest projections for the first few years. Rebecca laughed. And now we're planning location number 2 before our 3rd anniversary. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, I reflected. 3 months ago, I thought that woman might destroy everything we'd built. Instead, she inadvertently helped us build something stronger. To Karen Thompson, James raised an imaginary glass. The customer who was wrong about everything, except one thing, she really did need to speak to the owner. Because the owner had something to say, Rebecca added with a smile. As I moved back into the kitchen to check on the mentorship students who were observing dinner service, I reflected on how dramatically my professional life had changed. I was no longer just a chef who happened to have an ownership stake. I had fully embraced my dual identity as a culinary creator and a business leader with a platform and purpose. The confrontation that had begun with "I want to speak to the owner about your presence" had indeed been Karen Thompson's biggest mistake. In questioning my place, she had inadvertently cemented it, not just at the Sapphire, but in a broader movement toward recognition and respect for underrepresented voices in the culinary world. My grandmother had been right, as she so often was. When they questioned my place at the table, I didn't just sit there. I built my own table and invited others to join me. And that table was becoming larger and more inclusive every day. Have you ever had to stand your ground when someone questioned your right to be somewhere? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found inspiration in this journey, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth and belonging. Remember, sometimes our greatest challenges become our most powerful catalysts for growth. Thank you for joining me today, and I'm sending strength to anyone fighting to claim their rightful place in this world.